So I told Dave that he kind of just preached my sermon for me this morning. So I'm going to be talking about encouragement and hospitality. So it's just a continuation of Dave's great class. So the title of my lesson is The Hospitality of Jesus. What does that look like? What is the hospitality of Jesus? Let's turn with me today to 3 John. We're going to be in 3 John this morning, all of this morning, and there's only 15 verses, well 14 if you count the last one as 2 verses of 3 John. There's not a whole lot in here, but when you look at it and when you dig into it, you realize there's a lot of meat here. There's a lot to dig into. So let's dig into it. John opens his greeting to Gaius, who, if you don't know what 3 John is about, it's largely a letter of encouragement and a letter of hospitality that John writes to Gaius, who is an elder at this church. And Gaius is looked upon as a very favorable person, okay? The church here loves John. They do love John, but they love Gaius. They look at him at high regard. So John starts off the letter with an encouragement. He says, "The elder, to my dear friend Gaius, whom I love in the truth. Dear friend, I pray that you may enjoy good health and that all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well." So John starts this letter with this praying for good and physical health. It's typical for John to open letters with encouragement. He was a very encouraging guy. And John continues on in verse 3. He says, "It gave me great joy when some believers come and testified about your faithfulness to the truth, telling how you continue to walk in it. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth." John uses that "my children" a lot in a lot of his letters. And I think it's really cool because it shows a relationship there that John truly cares about the children of God. But John is also encouraged, and he is encouraged by how they are walking in their faith. And in the next couple verses, John gets into the bulk of this appeal for hospitality. In verses 5 through 6, he says, "Dear friend, you are faithful in what you are doing for the brothers and sisters, even though they are strangers to you. They have told the church about your love. Please send them on their way in a manner that honors God." You see, John is so impressed and he's so thankful for how the church there is responding to others, responding to welcoming strangers. I highlighted that point there, even though they are strangers to you. They didn't know these people, but they welcomed them into their fold anyway. And they are honoring those who John sent to them. He continues in verses 7 through 8, and he says, "It was for the sake of the name that they went out, receiving no help from the pagans. We ought therefore to show hospitality to such people, so that we may work together for truth." Again, John appeals to this hospitality. But that little phrase there, "work together for truth," is so important, is it not? John calls on them, and he is so thankful for what they're doing. So we could just end the letter there, right? There's no problems at this church, right? Ooh, that's a dangerous thing for me to say. Well, we get introduced to this character of Diotrephes, and this is where this letter starts to turn, right? John starts with encouragement and is thankful for how they're welcoming people in. But there's one guy, there's probably more than one guy, but there's one guy in this instant by the name of Diotrephes who just doesn't want to do this hospitality thing. He doesn't feel like it. And in verse 9 he says, "I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to be first, will not welcome us. So when I come, I will call attention to what he is doing, spreading malicious nonsense about us. Not satisfied with that, he even refuses to welcome other believers. He also stops those who want to do so and puts them out of the church." You see, I look at Diotrephes and I think he's like this third-string quarterback. If you ever know, in the NFL, there's a first-string quarterback, a second, and a third, right? And there's a fourth on the practice squad. He doesn't matter. Here's the thing. Every quarterback on that team wants to be the starter, right? He wants to have the opportunity to start and get on the field. Well, Diotrephes, he wants to be first in the church. He wants to be the guy for that church, right? But on his way to wanting to be noticed by the church, he doesn't care who he hurts along the way. He doesn't care who he rejects along the way. You see, Diotrephes wants to be first in the side of the church, but he doesn't care about who he's hurting along the way. And not only that, I highlighted this verse too because I think it's important. Not only satisfied with just being the guy, He even refuses to welcome other believers that John has sent to him. He's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to welcome you. So he's not just satisfied with being the first. He's shutting the doors to these missionaries and these people who are coming to his church, to this church, excuse me. Diotrephes has closed doors. John continues in verse 11. He says, "Dear friend, do not imitate what is evil, but imitate what is good. Anyone who does what is good is from God, and anyone who does what is evil has not seen God. Demetrius is well spoken of by everyone, and even by the truth itself. We also speak well of him, and you know that our testimony is true." It's very interesting. Verse 11 here kind of is like a bridge, right? And I think in a lot of ways it's comparing the character of Demetrius and Diotrephes and Gaius and Diotrephes, right? Because John says, do not imitate what is evil, but imitate what is good. We live in a world that likes to imitate what is evil. We live in a world that loves to show this dissension, to close their doors and say, I don't want you in here. We live in a world full of Diotrephes. Imitate what is good, not what is evil. John wants them to act hospitable and how Christ would, and not turn away from the importance of unity with others. We get this picture of who Demetrius was, and he was received in good testimony. And the people obviously really liked Demetrius, right? And they welcomed him with love. I think John kind of wanted to intercede here to not let Demetrius meet Diotrephes, but let him meet Gaius, right? Guys, we have people like this in the church today. We struggle with the same things with hospitality. But like Dave said this morning, encouragement, part of that is being hospitable to one another. Part of encouragement is saying, I love you. I don't always agree with you, but I love you, right? And I never saw hospitality like I did when I went to Alaska. And Scott talked about this last week. The houses that we were staying in, they weren't members of the church that we were working with. They were from different towns. They were from different cities. But they opened their homes to say, hey, come stay with us because we're happy you're here. You see, John wants that type of hospitality for this church. He continues in verse 13. He says, I have much to write to you, but I do not want to do so with pen and ink. I hope to see you soon, and we will talk face to face. Peace to you. The friends here send their greetings. Greet friends by their name. This may seem like a verse that you overlook, but I think it's super important. When you know someone's name and when you learn someone's name, you build a relationship with them. And you build this idea of being hospitable to them because in a way, knowing someone's name is a hospitable thing. If I didn't know Curtis's name and I just said, hey, that guy over there with the shirt, he would feel very disconnected. But I don't. I do know Curtis's name. I do know your name. You're good. You see, knowing someone's name and being able to share with them Jesus and saying their name is important. When I was a resident assistant in college, part of the thing that they trained us on was learning the people's names that we were moving into the dorms. And one of my best friends who I was in his wedding, his name's Joe, I used his name like 4 times in a sentence. I was like, hi, Joe. Welcome to York College. How you doing, Joe? Your room's up here, Joe. That would freak people out, okay? And it freaked him out. We're going up the steps and I say, hey, man, how's it going? I just needed to say your name so I knew what it was. We became best friends on that stairway. But I bring that up because if we are not willing to open our doors to people, if we're not willing to be open with people and be hospitable to one another, they're never going to know the message of Jesus. On my way back from Alaska, I had an opportunity to watch this movie called The Blind. And if you don't know what The Blind's about, it's about the story of Phil Robertson. If you don't know who Phil Robertson is, and then it's about Duck Dynasty. If you don't know what Duck Dynasty is, it's the guys with long beards. There. It's the easiest way to explain that. But in this picture, and you can turn the slide here, this is towards the end of the movie, Bill Smith, who is the guy who is talking with Phil and sharing the gospel with Phil, is about to baptize him here. But before this, we get the picture of Phil's life. And Phil fell into a lot of problems. He fell into addiction. He fell into anger and malice and lust. And he took all of that and he let it affect himself. He kicked his wife and kids out of his house, right? And so when Bill comes to him out in the woods, he had this trailer out in the woods that had no electricity, and he lived out in this trailer and lived off the land. And Phil talked about earlier in the movie that how he felt connected to the world through nature and through the woods. I understand that. When I was younger, me and my dad would go hunting all the time. I'm not a very good hunter, still don't have a deer. Hurts my Montana cred, I understand. But my dad, he would always get frustrated with me because we would carry these little Snickers bars with us. And I was so loud opening these Snickers bars. I was like, and my dad's like, you're going to scare the deer away, Christian, just give it to me. And he would open it very slowly and then hand me. He's like, there you go. I bring that up just because it's a funny story. But Phil felt like he was at home behind the duck blind. He felt like he was home there, that nothing else could get better. Did you know that Phil played football with a guy by the name of Terry Bradshaw? Just a little known name, right? In fact, Terry Bradshaw was Phil Robertson's backup. Think about that for a second. So Phil gave away an opportunity to go to the NFL so he could go and hunt and do all this stuff and fish and everything. Anyway, I bring this up is because he moved out to the woods after he lost everything. He kicked his wife and kids out. He was falling into alcoholism. He was letting everything control his life. And he didn't want to connect with anyone. He didn't want to be hospitable to anyone. In fact, Phil owns a bar in the movie, and the preacher comes in there to try to share the gospel with him. And he says, preachers are not welcome in here. Get out of here. Wow. So Bill sits down with him. He heads to the trailer, and Phil's trying to clean up the trailer. He's trying to get all this cleaned up. And Bill's like, it's all right. Let's just go talk outside. It's a nice day. Bill kind of sees how disarrayed his trailer is. And he sits with him, and he tells him the story of Jesus and the redemption that Jesus offers. And Phil tells him, he says, I don't know, man. It seems too good to be true. All that I've done, all the things that I've fallen into, I can't have redemption for what I've done. I'm a wild man. And the preacher looks at him and says, it's too good for all of us. Amen? It's too good for all of us. None of us deserve it. And then he goes on and he says, but you don't have to be that wild man anymore, but you're going to have to die. You're going to have to die. You're going to have to bury that old man and be raised again. The preacher then goes on to baptize him, and that's a picture from the movie. That was so powerful to me because I didn't deserve his grace. None of us have. But we have an opportunity to be welcomed home by Jesus. We have an opportunity to know what the hospitality of Jesus looks like. And we have an opportunity to share that hospitality of Jesus with others. You see, guys, this grace that Jesus offers, this salvation that Jesus offers, that's hospitality. That is the greatest example of hospitality ever. And I'm never going to be able to measure up to that. And the moment that we start acting like Diotrephes and picking and choosing who is welcomed in and closing our doors, that becomes some dangerous business, folks. Because Jesus says in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30, he says, come to me, all you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light. Guys, that promise that Jesus gives us, come to me, all you who are weary, it's for everyone. It's for everyone. When we don't know where to turn, we have Jesus. When we need a home and we can't find it, we can find it in Jesus. And when others close their doors, when others act like Diotrephes, when they close their doors, Jesus opens his to say, come to me, all who are weary, and I will give you rest.